Today's episode is generously supported by Yumiko. 2019 has arrived, which means it's time for New Year's resolutions, new episodes of Conversations on Dance, but most importantly, brand new colors and options from our amazing sponsor, Yumiko. Yumiko is the dance world's leader in high-quality customizable dancewear. And with their new colors and options that they just launched, there are even more ways to be uniquely you in the studio. Check out all of their new options on their website, yumiko.com. And while you are there, check out their new group discount, which offers you 10% off and free shipping on all orders of 10 pieces or more. Order now at yumiko.com. I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. This week on Conversations on Dance, we are joined by Marika Molnar, founder and president of Westside Dance Physical Therapy. Marika is often called the godmother of dance medicine, and with good reason. After helping to rehabilitate George Balanchine after a knee surgery, she became the first full-time physical therapist on staff at the New York City Ballet. Since then, she has influenced the lives of hundreds of dancers by increasing body awareness and providing daily manual care. Listen to how she got her start, what advice she has for other therapists treating dancers, and what she thinks dancers can do best to prevent injury and heal quickly.
Marika, we're so
Hi.
happy to have you here. I'm so sorry we had some technical difficulties there at the beginning, but now we are all set and ready to chat.
Great.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
We're here set up on a PT table, as we would expect to be at your practice. So let's just get started at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found your passion for physical therapy?
Well, that's a very interesting long story because I didn't know I had one until all of a sudden it kind of appeared as a light bulb off to the right of my head when I was teaching. I was teaching dance in a private school on the Upper East Side, and it was about my fourth year teaching, and I thought, something else I'm supposed to be doing. So I got my master's in dance education at NYU.
Yeah.
After that, I thought, oh, that's probably what it was. I just didn't feel qualified enough. And then that still wasn't it. And I am really not sure how, but someday in my fifth year of teaching, I got that light bulb feeling that literally went, why don't you go study PT school?
Just like that.
Just like that. It was literally a message from kind of off my right side of my head. So it must be the right side of my brain connecting to the left side of my body. Who knows? Anyway, so I basically thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. Applied to Columbia and got in. And the interesting thing about that is that most people who apply to Columbia have to go through a rigorous interview and have to send in all kinds of scores and marks on all different kinds of exams that they had to take to go to graduate school, of which I did not take any of those tests, but I got into the program. So when I sat there with the other 39 people that I was in school with, they were all lamenting how much they studied, how much time they spent, how much money they spent, all the hundreds of hours of volunteering in clinics. And I'm sitting there and I was like the last person. Plus, I was much older than all of them as well, because they all had come right out of college and I had already been teaching for 5 years. And I just looked up and I said, well, all I did was apply and got in.
They were like, oh boy, this one.
So I just figured at the time that was probably what I was supposed to be doing, since it was really so easy.
Wow.
So I did that. I got my degree. And during the time that I was teaching at the Nightingale Bamford School, I had a dance company and I had a gymnastics team. And a lot of the kids, it was an all-girls school, and a lot of the young ladies at the school kind of counted on me to help guide them in a direction of what they should do when they graduated from school, et cetera. And I was really pretty involved with their progress and kind of their passions. And during that time, I got to meet Dr. Hamilton and George Balanchine because one of my gymnasts and another one of my dancers' parents were good friends with Barbara Horgan, who was Mr. B's personal secretary, left hand, right hand at the time. She did pretty much everything. And whenever they got injured, we were, sent to Dr. Hamilton. So I had known Dr. Hamilton from the mid 70s on.
Okay.
And I had met Mr. Balanchine during that time because we would always go backstage, say hello to him. He would give us his seats. We would sit in the front row, first ring, first row. So I knew them.
Right.
It's one of those things. Well, I never knew at the time that I would end up being there at the New York City Ballet. But of course, I loved ballet, even though that's not what I chose to do. But then when I graduated from PT school, Dr. Hamilton had actually operated on a few dancers, and he needed somebody to help get them back in. So as soon as literally the day after I graduated from PT school, I started working with about 3 principal dancers in the New York City Ballet.
Wow.
So it was kind of like step right in and start working.
And that was that whole connection with Dr. Hamilton.
And that was the whole connection with Dr. Hamilton because he knew me. He knew I taught dance. He knew that prior to that, I had a physical education degree. And he knew that I was a physical therapist. So why shouldn't I be great working with the New York City Ballet?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I actually took the challenge very seriously and just started doing it,
Was that something that you had imagined would be a possibility when you went to school for physical therapy? Or were you thinking like you could be doing physical therapy for anyone? It wasn't connected to dance.
No, I had absolutely no forethought in that regard. It was just like, I should be doing physical therapy. And I guess I thought that at the time, as a physical therapist, I could probably, be more helpful to these young kids at the school and maybe even get a job at the school as the physical therapist to help. Because, kids in there, and I taught K through 12. So I taught kindergarten through 12th grade, every, all dance. So I did tap, jazz, ballet, modern, gymnastics.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, well, kids get hurt. Maybe I'll learn something to prevent some of these injuries that we were continuously having to go to Dr. Hamilton for. Because as they got older, they became more talented and maybe more courageous and tried different things and subsequently, occasionally, did get injured.
Right.
So when I found myself working with the New York City Ballet with Dr. Hamilton and then with Mr. Balanchine, that was the moment I realized that that's why I went to PT school.
Right.
Yeah. So you're talking about teaching dance. How did you come to dance originally in your life? When did you start
I
as a
danced
child?
my whole life. Literally, my mother was a choreographer and a dance teacher of Hungarian folk dance.
Wow.
And we came to this country in 1956.
Okay.
We left when the Russian tanks rolled into Budapest. And my parents, were refugees, were immigrants. And so from the time I could really, I think my earliest memory is about age 3 or 4 in Hungary, skipping around with flowers in my hair, doing some little Hungarian chardash or something. And then when we came to this country, my mother started a Hungarian folk dance ensemble.
Wow.
So I danced all the time with her company. And then Miss Kathy's dance studio and on. And then I, when I was in school, I was in the dance company. I did a lot of my own choreography as well as performed. So I was pretty much dancing my whole life. But I mean, I got through college teaching ballroom dancing. That's how I made some extra money.
Amazing.
Because I could do that. I knew all the ballroom dances because having been in a Hungarian folk dance company, we used to open all of these, Hungarian balls and where the debutantes were presented, socially. That was still something that was done back then.
Right.
I don't know if it's still done today, but so I knew all the ballroom dances. So that was a good way to make money.
That's so cool. I love that.
So when you did first start working with some New York City ballet dancers, you said you were working with 3 principals. How did it branch out from there? How did it become something that they started to consider very seriously? And
It was actually quite easy. Mr. B also had knee surgery, so I had to be his physical therapist. And he really did not like physical therapy. He didn't like doing exercises. So we literally had a compromise. He would do his exercises of bending and straightening his knees as long as I would do the waltz with him. So I would go to his apartment and we would waltz for a certain amount of time where I would count how many times his knee bent and straight.
Amazing.
Oh my God.
I mean, after
so
a while,
special.
it just got to be more fun than anything because he literally taught me how to waltz backwards, sideways. I mean, and then, he got to move his knee many times, so he recovered pretty rapidly.
That is such an amazing story. That Balanchine recovers from physical therapy with choreography.
Yes.
That's incredible.
That's pretty much exactly as it happened because he did not want to, your typical routine at the time. I'm going back to, late 70s, early 80s. Was, you did straight leg raising, you did, flexion, extension of the knee to get the mobility back after surgery. And I would do a little hands-on, moving the patella around and things like that. But he really preferred weight bearing, which is fine because actually weight bearing exercise is even better,
Right.
And also it was fun. I mean, I was mortified myself because I thought, oh my God, this is so scary. I'm dancing with George Balanchine. Oh my God. But it was kind of cool.
I mean, not very many people can say that.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's
it's
really
true.
cool.
And then he also used to make me eat borscht, which could be part of the recovery. The borscht is the red cabbage and the soup was very healthy for him.
So then how did it come about that in 1980 you became the first physical therapist to be hired as an on-site?
I think because a lot of dancers had injuries that required surgery, I think he probably spoke with Dr. Hamilton at length about this. And they decided maybe it would be helpful to prevent some of these injuries if somebody were there on site to watch the dancers and take care of some of the more minor issues so that they don't become major issues. And, of course, I was completely in awe and I was so honored. So there I was.
It's kind of crazy to think in retrospect that the company had been in existence for over 30 years at that point and had no one permanently on their staff helping. I mean, how did they manage with no...
Well, you guys are very young and you don't know this, but the culture of dance at the time was really of denial. You were never injured. Dancers were not injured. Okay, dancers did not have injuries. They didn't have to deal with their bodies. They basically rolled out of bed onto the stage and performed. So that's kind of the front story. But the background is, they went to people who could help them.
On their own.
And in a lot of cases, it was basically take some meds to get you not to feel the pain or get massage or do the Russian baths, do the hot, cold. But there was nothing happening in any place in the United States that was on-site care for the professional dancers.
Was New York City Ballet like the first one, I would imagine?
It actually was, as far as I know. However, in Europe, it was a different story because when I went over to London in 82 or 83 to spend some time at the Royal Ballet because they had physical therapy for years and years.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, they had a very good program there. So I went over and spent some time and had a wonderful opportunity to watch Joan Law's coach. And if you ever get a chance to see any of her books, they're beautiful. They're technique books.
Oh, interesting.
And I watched the coaching of getting an injured dancer back on stage and the physical therapy, of course, but also that interim period where you're kind of finished with your physical therapy, but you're not really ready to be in company class doing everything at the pace of a company class.
Right.
So I got to watch how they transition their dancers, which is something we really still don't do here in the United States so well. But we try and do it within the auspices of physical therapy.
Right.
But it would be great if there were this opportunity to do class. Of course, everything is based on time and space and
dancer availability.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
but I was very fortunate because once I got there, then I started really working with the dancers one-to-one, and I don't know, it just kind of evolved. The first 10 or 15 years, I have to say, were really hard because nobody really wanted to acknowledge that dancing hurts people. And
how did you overcome that?
Yeah.
Well, time passed and people changed.
They realized how valuable
all of a sudden, everybody realized the necessity of having somebody on site to help the dancers. I mean, if you look around the country, Helgi was still in the company when I started working there.
Right.
Peter was still a dancer in the company. Eve Anderson was still a dancer. Peter Bowl. So all these people were in the company as dancers, and I treated them, who then went on to have companies.
So they understand.
So they understood the necessity.
Right.
So as soon as they became heads of companies, they pretty much automatically had some type of physical therapy program.
That's amazing.
So that was really a wonderful thing to see.
This might skip around a little bit, but I'm curious how often companies, so you're talking about the directors being familiar with this program, how often do you hear from companies that people want to come here, work with you, and you kind of like help lead their physical therapy programs?
Oh, certainly. I've certainly done that many times in the past. I'd say probably in the last 5 or 10 years, more and more dance medicine has become a better known name. And since 1990, the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science has been really doing a lot of work to promote the whole idea of dance medicine.
Right.
So I'd say probably over the years, I've had quite a lot of physical therapists come through and learn not just the skills of physical therapy applied to dancers, but learning to appreciate dancers and what their needs are, not just when they're in the clinic doing rehab.
Right.
What do they have to really do when they go back? What does it really mean to go back to class? Because, often you hear dancers say, my doctor said I could go back to class. I said, well, does he know what class is? What is the meaning? I mean, so we really spend a lot of time educating the physical therapist and the doctors who work with dancers who don't have dance backgrounds.
Right.
What does it really mean? Because, it doesn't, if you haven't actually observed class, rehearsal, or performance, how do you know what it is? How do you know how many jumps a dancer does in class? How many times they releve? How many times they pirouette? How many times anything if you haven't observed it? So one of my basic bottom line things is don't even think about it until you've watched the class.
Right.
Until you've been in class enough times to understand what they do and what the difference is between bar and center and variation. And now that's just ballet.
Right.
So there's a whole other world of other types of dances that if you're going to treat Broadway dancers or modern dancers or hip hop dancers or Cirque du Soleil, you have to know what do they have to get back to.
Right.
Yeah, that's so interesting. How essential do you think it is to have a background in dance before you go into dance medicine? Or have you had experience with people who knew nothing and then kind of came up?
Have had experience with people, and it's perfectly fine as long as you are the kind of person that has curiosity and wants to learn. Because just because you can't do it or experience it in your body doesn't mean you can't help someone else get there.
Right.
I mean, I know myself for a fact, when I was 12 years old and they put pointe shoes on me, I knew ballet was not for me because it was so painful.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I can't obviously. I know how to help. I know how to fit a pointe shoe. I know how to help dancers get back on point, etc. But that's because I was curious about it and I wanted to learn about it. Make sure that I had a lot of different ways and modalities to get to the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you're, you try not to be stuck in your own rut about always going at it in one direction, because somebody else's needs may be different, even though the end goal is the same.
Right.
Interesting. So we're talking about physical therapists coming and working with you, but what about dancers that come? We've come up from Miami to see you before. What's maybe the furthest distance that a dancer has come to?
Just to see you.
Just to see you.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Russia, Japan. I don't know. I mean, in the
They come
past.
from all over.
Yeah, they have come from all over.
That's really amazing.
I've had people come.
Yeah.
Well, initially, let's say the first 10 or 15 years that I was doing it, people were being sent to me because I was the one, because I was the only one.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't because I was so great. It was because I was the one working with a professional company. And so professional dancers, when they came through, would seek me out.
Right.
So.
So amazing.
It's always fun. And honestly, the other thing that I usually say is you have to not only be curious, but you have to really have a passion for follow through. Like, I don't just want to see you and figure it out.
Right.
I want to figure it out, make sure you know what to do, and then see you on stage.
Right. Oh,
Because that's the end. Because why just do the beginning?
Yeah.
You got to do the whole thing.
That must feel so great for you to see dancers that you've worked through an
absolutely.
Injury with. And
It's the best thing.
How has your personal approach changed through the years? Since you really, you started from scratch. There was no community to learn from. You had to figure it out for yourself. Like, so how do you treat people differently than you did in, say, 1980?
I probably don't treat them much differently.
Really? Interesting.
Because I thought about this quite a lot myself. I mean, obviously, I've taken tons and tons of continuing education courses that I thought would be appropriate, like a lot of manual therapy courses to learn about body mechanics and joint mechanics. I've done visceral work. I've done craniosacral work. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I don't even know. I've done so many courses. I've done trainings in, many, many things. And what I find, actually, the bottom line is, for me, is when I meet the person and we have some kind of an interaction, that person tells me what the problem is. And then as long as we continue the interaction and make sure that the truth comes out from the person, then it doesn't really matter what I do, because we're getting to acknowledge the fact there is an injury, there's a way to make it go away, and there's a way to keep dancing. And if we can get around that, whatever treatment I use, obviously appropriately, is going to work and help. So whether I choose the acupuncture model, the biomechanical model, or the pain relief model, let's say those are three good ones to pick from, it's all going to work because they're all getting to the same thing.
Right.
Because there's an open line of communication with me and the dancer, the back and forth that lets the dancer know that I'm there with them.
Right.
But that they also have a responsibility to be there with themselves.
Right.
And not to give that away to a physical therapist or a doctor or a coach, that they have to have that internal responsibility of healing as well.
Yeah.
Because it's really all about healing. You have the energies of the healing, whether it's microcurrent, macrocurrent, hands-on, it's all happening.
Right. It's so funny how dancers know their body so well, right? Even know the anatomy sometimes and can really communicate these things to you. So I'm sure that's helpful in a lot of instances, but is it also sometimes dancers trying to be their own doctors and you're kind of like, let's see what the real issue is?
I love it because I'm always teaching dancers the words and the terminology so that when they go to their doctors, they can use that terminology.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then it shows the physicians and the other physical therapists that these dancers really know what they're, they know their body parts. They know what's happening. They can describe what's happening.
Right.
As opposed to saying to the doctor something like, oh, when I releve and I pirouette, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They'll say, you know what? When I plan to flex my ankle, my FHL pinches in the back.
Yeah.
Now, at least right away, that physician or other physical therapist knows what you're talking about.
That's so true.
And then gets the visual of you going up on point and pirouetting.
Right.
So sometimes I'm always, I mean, of course, I have an inner smile that says, yes.
Aw. It's
because they know. You
Yeah.
guys know.
It's true. I always feel that way, that I've learned so much from physical therapy. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And you should. I mean, you spend enough time doing it,
It's
right?
true. It's
I mean,
true.
really.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely true.
So you talked about how you have to know the needs of the dancer, if it's going to be hip hop or Broadway or whatnot. Even within just the New York City Ballet, things have changed so much since 1980. At that point, the repertoire was primarily Balanchine and Robbins, but the demands being made on the dancers now are much broader. The rep is a lot broader. Yeah. So how have you altered that process with them to ensure that they can do these kind of, crazier, more extreme things that are now required of them?
Well, I haven't altered the process at all because they still take ballet class. And the one or two times where we've had different choreographic needs, we have brought in teachers to teach class in the specific technique,
right?
Which is really what I think has to happen a little bit more,
right?
Totally.
It's one thing. It's one thing if you're doing if a ballet choreographer is choreographing ballet and you've taken a ballet class, but if a choreographer who really doesn't know ballet is choreographing ballet, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Totally.
Because they don't really understand as well what movements are possible and what movements are just really beyond and should really not be done.
Right.
So, but it's hard to make that decision between the choreographer's artistic intent and what could be really dangerous until you see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And the dancers are just going to do it anyway.
And that's the truth.
Right.
The dancers will do
whatever they're asked.
Yeah.
Whatever they're asked. And I have to say, only it hasn't been that bad at all. I mean, I can only remember really one time when I ran in and I, spoke to the artistic director and said, please, you have to see what's happening. This is really dangerous and I just can't allow it. And that really only happened once. Yeah. So I have to say that for the most part, the choreographers are cognizant of what it is they're asking for to some extent. But again, going back to a dancer's responsibility to speak up, and you're too young to know, but dancers didn't used to speak up.
Right.
Okay. Back in the days, at least my first 20 years or so, dancers didn't tell choreographers that maybe they shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And
they wouldn't even tell people they were injured.
No, exactly. The last thing they would do would be to say anything like that.
Yeah. So do you feel like because dancers have this better body awareness now, they have a better understanding of their bodies, they have the ability to speak up? Do you feel that that's making a positive impact on companies and dancers' health?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely do.
Yeah. That's good.
And also, when you think about it, we have quote unquote ballet companies, but our ballet companies are all doing
everything
contemporary works. And they're doing pieces without putting point shoes on, and they're doing things without tutus. And sometimes even costumes will be dangerous.
Right.
And we've seen that many times, as I'm sure you have too.
Yeah.
You can be put in a costume that absolutely does not move with you.
Yeah.
And forces your body into another position.
Yeah.
And there you are. What are you going to do?
Back spasm.
Uh-huh.
What happens when you have those corsets on?
That was very triggering because that reminded me of a time when I was in something that did not fit me and really put my back out.
Yeah.
But
every every nutcracker with all the, bending and no movement in the costumes is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I have a really important question.
Okay.
So, in the Balanchine training, a lot of times he would emphasize not putting your heels down all the way in jumping. There's always like a lot of controversy between more classically trained dancers or different styles about putting your heels on the floor. From your perspective, from a health perspective, what do you feel about this conversation?
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation because it seems kind of obvious that if you're moving fast, you can't put your heels down. If you're landing and you're moving slow, put your heels down. So to me, it's not really that people make a very big deal about this. But for example, if you're jumping, as you suggested, and you land and push right off, then you timing wise, you have to stay with the music.
Right.
You don't have time to land on your heel and then push off again. And not necessarily, it's really not as necessary as if you're doing plie into a releve.
Right.
Back into a plie. Then, of course, you should put your heel down. You shouldn't keep your heel off
Right.
when you go into your demi plie.
Right.
And then releve. You should put your heel down because you want to give that Achilles its nice range of motion.
Right.
So I think it's really a timing issue.
It's more that than
More
really,
that, yeah. I do.
So it's not, you don't feel like it's dangerous though to do that, obviously, because
No.
some people will say like that'll hurt your Achilles, right?
Are there things that are an aesthetic issue that you wish ballet could pull back a little bit from that cause
Sure.
the majority of
I
injuries?
think one aesthetic issue that, I mean, we all love to see it, the hyperextended knees.
Yeah.
And when you really go beyond those 5 degrees of hyperextension, you're becoming very vulnerable. And that the knee joint is a very dangerous joint to make unstable.
Right. Interesting.
So that for me, I think people should definitely stop hyperextending their knees
Pull
so
up.
much.
Yeah. Pull up out of that hyperextension.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing if it's your gesture leg and you're extending and you have hyperextension and
You're not
pointing
weight bearing.
and it's not your weight bearing leg. But then as and as you all know, once you have hyperextended knees and you kind of are waiting around in the back for your turn or whatever,
And
you end up pushing further back into it because it
Sitting in
feels more comfortable.
Yeah.
And when you're not there and you're being told by me to just straighten your knees and not hyperextend, you feel like your knees are bent.
Totally. I have that problem. Right?
Yes. And that the only real way to correct that is to stop doing it
And just practice.
and just practice finding that posture that's only 5 degrees and not 15 degrees.
Right. And that starts from just like normal life, like you're saying, like waiting backstage or
You're standing around waiting for the
first
bus.
position.
Yes.
I mean, it drives me crazy. How many kids do we see that if we go teach other places and they just stand in first position with their heels completely apart and their knees touching
Together, yeah. The first and second position simultaneously.
Oh my
Dr.
gosh.
Hamilton used to talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really bad habit, and it not only does it cause your knees to become unstable, but it also kind of wrecks your whole ability to know where you are in space, because those little mechanoreceptors in your knees send information to your brain, and your brain then sends information back down, and so you kind of get lost. You don't know where you are in your pirouettes.
I was just going to say, I bet for
Yeah.
pirouettes, that's like an extra
It
tricky
makes it so
factor.
much harder. Makes it so much harder. Yeah, and if you think about it, the way the body's designed, if your knee is being pushed back, usually your hip is pushed forward.
Right.
So now
you have
you're
to
pushing the
counterbalance.
front of your hips into those ligaments and the top of the joint, causing irritation, possible labral tears. And then if you keep going up the chain, your upper body is back,
Right.
and your front ribs are flaring out. They're like, woo, you know.
So
Yeah.
It's a
really
whole-
not great chain. That's
It's
going
not a
on
great
there.
chain.
So
And so what's happening at the feet? Your plantar flexion or your point has to become even greater. So as far back as your knee goes, you have to have that much more point.
so you're like an S shape all the way up,
Yeah.
trying to counterbalance
But
yourself.
aesthetically, as we began this conversation,
It looks
those of us that love ballet, we love that look,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But it's really not really not a good place to be.
I always tell my students that too, who have a lot of hyperextension, that, and from my experience too, even though I should have done better about it when I was dancing, but when you feel like, you just feel like your knee is bent and it just feels so wrong, like you're saying. So it's just like getting that,
You have to
getting
memorize
used to that
the new
place.
feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like anything, though. I mean, so many, I think of when I've had to reassess a certain element of my dancing because it maybe contributed to an injury, but I'll, like, the therapist will look at you and go, like, this is normal, this is right. And maybe it's like the way you square your hips or don't or whatever. And you just have to memorize the new feeling of what is actually correct because your body is so used to the other thing.
Right.
Exactly. And or you can use simple little aids like crisscross tape behind your knee so that if you do start to push back too much,
You feel
it pulls on your skin.
Amazing.
That's so good.
So how do you do, now I'm going to ask you because I'm going to do this for myself. So how do you do it? You start it like in the correct position and make sure that that tape is nice and tight in the back, like kinesio tape.
Exactly. Kinesio tape is wonderful for that. You just make an X, marks the spot, and that's the back of your knee where where that crease is.
Yeah.
And then you do it with your knee in when your knee is straight, 0
Actual
degrees
straight. Yeah.
Because then as you start to push back, you'll feel it pull.
So it's like that.
It's like
proprioception
yeah,
reminder.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's
That's
just
cool.
a little aid to clue you in. I do the same thing often with in the front to try and help people keep their ribs down. I just make an X in the front so that if they lift their ribs up too much, they feel the pull, and then they'll bring it down.
Amazing.
You could do easy little, it's just for feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't wear it forever. It's just for,
started.
maybe a little bit of time in class just to give them that feedback.
Yeah. Very cool. Is there something that you feel like you wish, so we talk a lot about how we're talking about here, how we learned so much from physical therapy. And like for us, that started during our careers when we were able to have access to this. Is there something that you wish that schools would do to help kids, A, prevent injuries, and B, kind of like learn more about their bodies and any sort of program like that?
Well, I know that we're doing quite a bit at SAB where we give lectures to the young students, and we even invite the parents in.
Very cool.
To the younger students. And we give lectures specifically to the more advanced students about things that we've noticed are more common injury-wise. And for example, the most common thing would be an ankle sprain. Well, how can you prevent your ankle sprain? How can you prevent your ankle sprain, Michael?
TheraBands.
Sure.
Okay.
I never sprained my ankle.
Don't say that now, knock on wood.
Okay, so here's something I'm going to tell you that you don't know. One of the best ways to prevent your ankle sprain is to be able to flex your pinky straight up.
Oh, man.
By itself.
Yep.
Oh,
Because
wow.
the pinky, that muscle, will help that whole lateral side of your foot stay up. Whereas most people, if they can't lift their pinky, their
right
pinky
now.
either
Sure
goes out to the side or goes down. So when you land, if that proprioceptive information isn't there, it'll allow that fifth metatarsal to roll over. Whereas if you can use it and get the pinky, fourth, and third tendons into that little extensor digitorum brevis belly on the lateral side of your foot to function well, you will help prevent a lot of rollovers. Those little silly rollovers that add up over the years.
Totally.
Wow.
So how do you make that happen? That pinky
So
to
you
work on
teach
its own?
that exercise where you're sitting with your legs flat on the floor and you think of playing the piano. You lift your pinky, 4, 3, 2, 1. Put it down. So you're flexing pinky first as much as possible. And you do it as an exercise. And a lot of people can't do this, so don't feel bad about this. This is because when did you ever do it?
Never.
And what do you always do with your pinky and your toes? You're always pointing them down. You're always plantar flexing them.
Right.
So you need to counter this by doing some dorsiflexion because the tendons of your toes, the small ones, help to protect the lateral side of your foot, but the long tendons that cross the front of your ankle help to protect your talus from going too far forward
And getting stuck.
when if you're rolling over from point position. So actually doing that exercise with your toes in the opposite direction will help a lot with preventing ankle sprains.
So do you suggest doing that just before class or periodically throughout the day?
I would do it
All the time?
periodically
Yeah.
throughout the day several times. And then also the other thing would be for ankle sprains would be to do single leg releves in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Slow, fast, medium, to different heights of your heel on and off. And even to start maybe with the heel lower than your forefoot
Mm-hmm.
so that you spend about, that would take like, a good minute a day on each foot,
Right.
strengthening your ankle and the tendons that cross on either side of your ankle.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So good. Oh my gosh. I'm going to try all of these things, all of these tips. It's going to be great. We don't need them anymore, but I'm going to.
Yes, you do. You always need them. Because look, one day you're going to see the ice cream truck across the street and want to get that ice cream. You're going to step off the curb.
And bam.
And your pinky's going to go, wait a second. I'm going to protect us. Lift up and you won't sprain your ankle.
Yay.
No, actually, that is funny because I lied. I did sprain my ankle last year after having retired. I was jogging to the subway and I fell in a pothole.
And it went.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was scary. I was like, now I know what other people feel like. It's never happened to me.
It's really scary. How important is it for dancers to train in that parallel position like you were just talking about?
It's very important.
Yeah. Why is that?
Training in parallel position is the alignment of the body's muscles, tendons, joints.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can strengthen everything in the alignment that it's meant to be in the congruency of the joints, then they'll be there for you when you do turnout or turning or single leg.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think it's very important.
Okay.
And that's why you see, at least presently, a lot of people are doing cross training in the gyms and with weights in the parallel position.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you do need to, strengthen your turnout muscles, etc. But you need to first have the foundation to have everything know what it's supposed to do.
Right. Awesome. Do you have any more questions? I feel like
I think we could do the lightning round.
We have a lightning
now.
round for you.
So we do. It's just a quick little round where we ask something with a short answer. First thing that you think of. So what's the number one thing that a dancer should do to prevent injury, like on a daily basis? What's the
sleep.
Sleep.
Sleep well. Sleep, 8 to 10 hours.
So that makes me feel good about. I was religious about that.
Yeah.
Sleep is key.
Yeah. I'd be like, good night at 9:30.
It's key.
Amazing. Ice or heat?
Depends. Are you trying to lower your pain? Because if you're trying to lower pain, then ice is probably working for you better than heat. But if you want better blood circulation, you should really alternate hot and cold. And if you want muscles to relax, then you do heat. If you have an acutely swollen joint, you can put ice and compression on it for 10 minutes to not to let it heat up so much, but follow that by alternating hot and cold.
Okay.
But cold is definitely good for pain.
What's the best thing a dancer can do after a long day of rehearsal or performance to promote muscle recovery? The
best thing they can do would be to lie down on a power setter and breathe so that they get better oxygenated. They get their parasympathetic nervous system to start kicking in and reducing the stress from the day. Because whether you're physically working out or mentally working out, learning something, that increases your stress level. So some of your hormones, your stress hormones like cortisol, are very increased. And really you need to calm that down so that you can get a good night's sleep.
Can you tell us actually a little bit about your parasetter? We meant to ask you. Yeah.
I actually developed it because, number one, I can't stand those rollers that people are killing themselves rolling out muscles.
The foam rollers.
The foam rollers.
Really?
I think that's really pretty silly. But basically, I devised it so that there was a way for the dancer to feel their back, especially their ribs, and to breathe. Because most dancers, as you know, don't breathe very deeply, and they breathe very much to the front. So their ribs are always popping forward, and then their back muscles get very tight and short and are always under tension. So by lying on the parasetter, which is a double convex curve with a nice channel in the middle, they can actually feel where are these back ribs that I never feel.
Right.
They can feel it. They can inhale deeply and allow those ribs to expand at the same time that those spinous processes down the middle of your back are just floating in a space. They're not being pushed on the way you would if you were lying on one of those 6-inch long foam rollers.
Right.
And by allowing those segments to relax, you're encouraging the parasympathetic nervous system to start its work and allow you to rest and relax and do all the nice things that you're supposed to do for your body, because you do have to recover from a long day.
And if our listeners would like to get one of those, where do they?
Oh, well, they
one?
can, you know what? They can go to Physical Mind Institute.
Okay.
Here in New York, they sell them. And they can even go online and look it up because there's quite a lot of videos on how to use it. They can go, Physical Mind is one word, Physical Mind Institute. They can also go and watch the videos, and then usually it gets sent. I mean, we sell them here at my office too, but I usually only have 4 or 5 at any one time. Yeah.
Cool.
But they're really great, and everybody in, most everybody in our company actually has their own at this point, because it's so great to lie down on it and just to start breathing, and it's very relaxing.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking about it the other day. I was like, oh, I miss that parasetter we used to have we had one at Miami City Ballet. We had a few.
Yeah.
I love them.
They're really great.
Yeah.
And you can recover on it, but you could also do your stabilization exercises while you're lying on it. And that's nice because your spinous process isn't being pushed into the floor.
Right.
Yeah.
It's being supported.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really nice thing. And we don't really. One of the things that I would also love for companies to recognize is that dancers need recovery time. So if your last show ends at 10:30 p.m. or 11 p.m., class should not start at 10:30 in the morning because you haven't even had 12 hours. If at possibly looking ahead a little bit and figuring out, okay, maybe we'll start class at 11:30 and give everybody at least 12 hours.
Right.
And yourselves, when you finish dancing, you don't go home and go to sleep.
Yeah.
You're so revved up.
Yeah,
So it takes
totally.
like at least 2 or 3 hours before you can relax.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then you have to wake up. And so there's your sleep. There's your lack of sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even always our fault that we can't sleep.
No. I know. Believe me.
All right. We're back to our lightning round.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm glad we got to talk about the parasetter though. There's only 2 more left. Most important element of healing from an injury.
Most important element of healing.
Maybe
from
like
an
what you can
injury?
do for yourself.
Okay. Just believe that it's possible.
It's such a big, important.
It's so important, and not to have fear, because fear is what holds you back the most. I'm telling you, in my experience, if you can overcome the fear of walking or going up and down stairs or doing a releve, and know that you're doing the best you can and you're getting the right help, do it. And I'm not going to say that let pain be your guide, because sometimes pain isn't giving you the right information.
Right.
You can't always have 100% pain-free return.
Right.
So I would say really to believe that it's possible and to do everything you're supposed to be doing, along with sleep.
Sleep.
So if you could share one piece of knowledge with every dancer in the world, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, one piece of knowledge, just keep doing it. Because dancing is the joy of life,
It is.
and be honest and true to yourself.
Yeah. That was beautiful. What a great note to end on.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marika.
My
That was
pleasure.
So glad we got to
My
do this.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in this week. If you have not already, we invite you to subscribe to Conversations on Dance now, wherever you get your podcasts. By subscribing, you will get a notification every Monday when a new episode goes live. This way you won't miss a moment of the COD action. And if you like what you heard today, we invite you to rate us and review us on iTunes. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.